As spring appears across North Carolina, azaleas come into their full glory as one of the most popular of all of our landscape plants. From early April to the end of May and even into June, as we go from the coast to the mountains, it is one plant that does well throughout the state. There are many different kinds. In front of me here we see the evergreen azaleas that are probably the most popular because people like something that carries the landscape through the winter with that evergreen foliage. But there is another group of plants that are very appropriate to use, and certainly here in North Carolina where they're native. That's the deciduous or the evergreen azaleas. In many places in the state they are called honeysuckle or honeysuckle azaleas because they have a flower that looks much like honeysuckle and an intense fragrance as well. There are about 10 or 12 different native azaleas that grow throughout the southeastern United States, and they're magnificent plants that we need to consider to use more often. They come in all colors, shades from whites through pale pinks, intense pinks, into oranges, salmons, reds, and so forth. One of the advantages of using them as a deciduous plant is the fact that they can withstand our very cold winter periods in bright sun without the leaf scorch that we often get on our evergreen types. So if you have a sunny spot and would still like to grow some sort of an azalea that looks good, consider these wild native types. Now, they're harder to find. Few of our people are growing and propagating them in the nursery industry, even though they're native to the state. But we're beginning to see more and more of them appear in the marketplace as our nurserymen learn how to germinate the seeds, take the cuttings, and to put these into the marketplace. They're particularly nice in landscapes where you have a native woods and you want to enhance a few of the plants that are already there, to go out and buy more of the natives to add them into that area. Again, like all azaleas, they're going to need organic soil, something that you would put a lot of bark or peat moss in the area, and avoid any of your waterlogged or poor drained areas. Here you see an even more spectacular version of the deciduous of azaleas, which also involved our North Carolina azaleas. When the plant explorers got into Asia and discovered the Himalayas, Japan, and China, they found other deciduous azaleas that had much larger flowers, but were not as hardy as the ones from North Carolina. In recent decades, hybridizers have combined the characters of these two, primarily in England, but more recently in the States, to provide things such as the X-berry hybrids and others, which have the very large flower size, some of the fragrance of the American types that make even more spectacular American plants. They happen to not flower as freely, but the individual flowers are much more spectacular. So these two groups are plants that you might possibly consider to add to the diverse array of azaleas that we already have. Again, the deciduous types are less commonly seen, but they offer spectacular colors such as the yellows, which we don't have in the evergreen azaleas. They offer great fragrance, another valuable landscape attribute that we don't have in our evergreen azaleas. So in your landscapes, use some evergreens, some deciduous, each bringing in their own wonderful part of the landscape.